this EBSI CAN project, EBSI in Canada. We're looking at the feasibility of using the EBSI infrastructure, which was always meant to be as a public good, but really extending it beyond its use in Europe, even though there's no such a thing as Europe, as our Canadian friends know. Okay, we're looking at a whole bunch of, any education in this part of the world, it's up to the jurisdiction of nation states as to what they want to do. But that's the whole purpose of EBSI. It's like, if anybody wants to use it in Europe, it's there, and it's currently being trialed in various pilots, both within the EBSI framework and within some of these large-scale pilots like DC4U, which Luis and Claudia and I and others are involved with. We're going to focus primarily here on end-to-end journeys, and Luis will be taking you through some of those scenarios, which we've been kind of visualizing at the moment. We're going to test if we're on the right kind of tracks. We've had some initial discussions, and we're also aware, by the way, that there's no such a thing as Canada. Okay, so we're really looking at, can you use this technology outside Europe? And what we're doing is we talk to people like you. So this is a very important meeting for us. Some of these discussions are structured, some of them aren't. We're going to lever on what we know about EBSI, those of us who have been involved from day one, and what we know about some of these large-scale pilots that are trying to see if EBSI can be used within different contexts. This is all about networking. So I'm hoping that you two will get something out of this, and that you two, from meeting other people and contributing to this project, that this may facilitate your discussions. I want to make it very clear that, neither Luis nor I nor Claudia, anybody involved in this project, we're not here to sell you EBSI. We are here to, on behalf of the Commission, determine if this technology can actually be used, scaled up for user journeys, and in other contexts for which it was not initially conceptualized. Okay, even though for several reasons, Canada has been on the radar for DG Connect for quite a long time, and there have been some of you have been looking at some of those scenarios. Can EBSI be used in Canada, I guess. And what we're going to do is, on the basis of research discussions, we're going to be looking at, coming up with a report which will be looking at QA regimes in both the EU and Canada. Simply scene setting will be identifying some of the critical issues, I think, in terms of this project, what's feasible, what isn't. We will be making a series of recommendations, both to the EU and the Canadian authorities, as and when we get down to having some of those discussions. And ideally, we'll come up with a roadmap. And here we are, again, Joanne is here, and the Micreds team is here, and Aruka are here. We've already identified the potential bridge based, again, on some of these discussions which were happening before we even got involved. So the focus is on bridges between EBSI, made in the EU, very much aware of what's been happening now with Micreds and Aruk and Parchment in Canada. And I think at the end of it, we'll have some transcripts of the of people that we're interviewing, and on we go. But I want to make it very clear, we're not here, this is not some sort of whitewash thing and trying to force people to use this technology at all costs. That's not what we're here for. And I think here, from this point onwards, I think I'll shut up, and Luis will dive in with the maybe more important part of this quick presentation. Okay, so Luis is going to talk about use case studies. Luis, over to you.
Thanks, Alex. So, as explained by Alex, we will do a practical approach, and that practical approach will be based on the analysis of several key factors to enable the simple recognition of digital credentials during the learning journey between Europe and Canada, or the other way around. So one of the key objectives will be to identify the trust models and trust services that will allow that issuance, but also the verification almost in real time. So to do this, we have planned to identify a set of use cases, and also to characterize them. We have first identified a set key of elements, as you can see right now on the screen, based on some key actors, roles, and elements. We want to highlight the following ones. So the learner, so analyzing the governance and the trust model at both the European and Canadian sites. For natural persons, will allow us to identify potential gaps or action lines to align both trust models. Then the wallet, of course, to analyze the capabilities that wallets must support or develop to enable seamless transatlantic mobility of digital credentials. And the issuer, analyzing the governance and trust model, same as for natural persons, but for legal entities, on both sides also, European and Canadian side. That will also allow us to identify potential gaps and action lines for both trust models. It's important because at the end, it's about trust. It's about how we can match things on one side to match to things on the other side. Then, of course, the digital credentials itself, in a similar way, analyzing the ontologies, the data models, or the schemas used in both jurisdictions. That should also allow us to identify alignment opportunities and matching between profiles, credential profiles. Finally, the verifiers, the service providers, those that will provide some enrollment, some recognition services, equivalent in a similar way to the issuers of digital credentials, analyzing also how the service providers are identified and characterized, will also help us to complete the picture of the ecosystem of all the actors. Next slide, please, Alex. Or sorry, Claudia, I think. Sorry, Claudia. So to correctly understand the scenarios that I said before by Alex, all the scenarios, all this deck, but also the scenarios will be shared with all of you after the meeting. To correctly understand the scenarios, we provided, well, in this slide here, and based on the key elements that I have previously identified, we present this matrix with the different combinations that we understand that are the ones of interest for the required analysis. As you can see, starting from scenario A, in which we have an European issuer, a European citizen, a European wallet on the one hand, and on the other hand, we have a Canadian verifier. What we are doing in the other scenarios, in the scenario B, C, and D, is to introduce the necessary updates and necessary changes for the previously identified key elements. So that with the 4 scenarios, we will cover the different basic combinations. And in this way, we will, with the corresponding also analysis for each of the scenarios, of course, we understand that we will be able to cover the most common causes of potential real scenarios. Next slide, please, Alex. Also, the context of today's meeting is not to analyze in detail of each of the scenarios, right? But rather to validate if the ones presented make sense. You really think that they make sense. They are sufficient. They are enough. We have enough scenarios and combinations. Or if we should add more use cases that starting from this approach, we will not go deeper now in each of the scenarios, but just allow me to explain how each of the scenarios is explained. So when you will receive the material, you will be able to identify this thing. As you can see, each scenario is coded with A, B, C, or D. This is the scenario A, of course. As you can see, each scenario then is followed by a short and visual summary of the specific scenario. In this case, for scenario A, this is an EU citizen with a bachelor's degree from an EU university who plans to continue his studies at a Canadian higher education institution using the MakeReds platform. This is the short one. In the profile section, we will give a slightly less syntactic view, so more detail there, explicitly mentioning all the key elements that we have already presented. Finally, in the steps section, you will be able to find all the steps that must be considered to correctly complete the use case of the specific scenario, scenario A, B, C, or D. In the screen, we only see the list of the 3 main steps, but if you can go to the next slide, please, Alex. Sorry, Claudia, again. For each step, there is also an exhaustive detail that as a whole must allow us to analyze and understand the use case by itself from the perspective of the 4 dimensions of interoperability. That means the governance dimension, the legal one, and by the legal one, we need to identify also, understand identity on the one side and data on the other hand. Then semantic interoperability, and finally, the technological interoperability. Next slide, please, Alex. Claudia, sorry. So once the context and the key elements have been introduced, we see in this slide the 4 use cases, the users scenarios that has already been identified. For scenario A, I already explained. Scenario B, this is a Canadian citizen with a bachelor degree, graduate from a Canadian university, hosted in her Canadian wallet. So here we change also the not just the seat, but also the wallet, that plans further studies in a higher education institution. Scenario C, we also introduce a new update, and here we have an EU citizen with a bachelor degree, graduate from a Canadian university, hosted in a Canadian wallet that wants to move to a higher education institution in Europe. And for the scenario D, the last combination of all of the key elements, we have a Canadian citizen with a bachelor degree, graduate from an EU university, of course, all that hosted in her European wallet, that plans further studies in a Canadian higher education institution. So these are the 4 main scenarios, and that combines all the key elements that we have previously shared. Don't worry, I know it's too much information in a short time, but here today, I think the goal is just to introduce how we have selected these, what are the key elements that we have already identified, how they are combined, and I think now Alex and Claudia will explain it in more detail, but key point is to validate things. Okay, that's all from my side, Alex, I think.
I think in terms of a discussion, and I'm completely aware of the fact that we've kind of overwhelmed you with stuff. So I actually don't know whether we should, keep some of these slides available just to remind you of what we're talking about. But I think the validation of the use cases is I think where we can get to right now. I think in terms of technology infrastructure, those of you who are more technologically inclined, I think are we on the right track? I think in terms of regulations, I think we had our first discussions. I think there was a lot of discussions about federal governments and other types of governments. I think what we need to focus on is something which might work. So again, it's almost like let's look at this technology. If there are players on the other side of the pond, and I'm saying here from a European perspective, somebody in Canada wants to run with this, what other regulatory problems could we encounter if we were to use this technology? I think on the European side, I think we have a fair idea in terms of the QA regimes which are here, because EBSI was built from the ground up, literally trying to mirror real life. Okay, so that's the way it's being built. So with I think privacy considerations, something about GDPR, don't know much in terms of what's happening again in Canada. And I think in terms of economic and social benefits, again, Heinz said that he's the only private sector person here. Well, there's also Simone from Parchment. How can we get this thing to work if it is going to work? And I think this idea about, again, from the Canadian side, from the federal government's point of view, the interest in the project either a year ago and now was all about facilitating movement of people from one part of the world to the other. And I guess from our perspective, we're deeply interested in the rights of citizens as opposed to institutional rights, okay, or university rights. So I guess some of you guys who work at universities, EBSI was always built to facilitate the mobility of people and young people moving from one part of the world to another, to improve their lives or for other reasons. We are still facing regimes where paper is still the way that you have to prove that you actually have a degree. there's expenses involved in young people having to prove that they actually have a degree. And even if you get a PDF, there's also some other institutions getting in the way. So this is about helping people at the end of the day. So I think in terms of a discussion now, we have to decide how we're going to run with this. Okay, I can stop sharing this. I haven't seen the chat messages here. So I don't know if, you know, the floor is open really. We'd love to hear from you. We will share the slides with you afterwards and other documentation. I think from what you've heard, does this sound like a logical project? A, let's start from the ground up, okay? And two, in terms of user journeys, is this something that potentially we've missed out, or do any of those user journeys resonate with you? So I'm opening the floor to whoever wants to jump in. Yeah. So Nikos, I think, is, you know, from the University of the Aegean first. And Claudia, can you look for these for me, please? Because I can't see too clearly as who's raising hands. So if you can run with this. I
Thanks,
think
Alex.
Joanne, yeah. Off you
Thank
go.
you. So I put this question in the chat as well. I was wondering if we're going to include in the discussion the identities of the citizens, because this brings a whole bag of different questions that we need to consider, especially with the new EIDAS regulation, right? So is this part of the discussion, or we're only focusing on the academic credentials?
Maybe I can take this, Alex.
Yeah.
But quick answer, short answer, yes. This, maybe we can display again, maybe Alex, the slide with the key elements, but if not, I can read. So yes, identity of natural persons matters, right? Because this at the end is about trust models. It's about what are the specific, the governance, the specific processes, and so on. For the different actors, and that's why I was also referring to actors, elements, and so on. Natural persons, issuers, okay, previous one. Well, yes, this can work, or maybe, sorry, Alex, maybe the next one with the matrix. Yeah, here it is. So citizen is natural person's identity, and on European Union, as you know, we have the EIDAS. Well, in fact, today the Council approved also the new review, right? So everything is done from a regulatory perspective here, legal perspective in Europe. On the Canadian side, we are aware that there's also the pan-Canadian framework, right? But part of the goals of the project. So it's under the scope of the project. Yes, it is, right? Not just for citizens, for natural persons, also for legal entities. But we need to find out, we need to work, understand how things are working as per today, and maybe give recommendations about how things could or should evolve on the line. So I think, I hope that answers, Nikos.
Yeah, definitely, Luis. Thank you. Okay, cool.
Okay.
Next, I would jump to Henny, because Henny already had a question on the chat, and I see your hand raised as well, and then we continue.
Okay, yeah, just a very quick question in the chat. I was wondering if there are any insight in the numbers of citizen students per use case. So maybe you can focus on, okay, it will. This is the group that will benefit the most of it. That is one thing I would like to say, and the other one is that I think you mentioned it already, Luis. Let's not only focus on, let's say, things like a wallet or a platform. I think it's an ecosystem of actors, and they're all necessary to run this. And no, I will stop here. I have some other comments, but then I'm talking on end. So another one, please.
Maybe Claudia, do you want to take the first question from Henny?
About the number, right? At the moment, we are in discussion with university organizations, so we cannot exactly tell a number. We are hoping to reach out as many as possible. So I think after that, we may ask your help if you know who would be the best to get in touch. Any suggestion would be helpful, but we are still working on that.
Yeah, I think we need to use the multiplier effect in a way. And
Yes,
that's another reason why we're reaching out to you. Okay, people who
Yes.
know people. I mean, I think that would be really helpful. Again, we've got a pretty tough deadline. Okay, this is supposed to be done by the 30th of June, which is a bit crazy, but for various reasons, here we are. So we'll do what we can do. I think it's important we have a representative sample. I think that's, but we can't tell you how, how large that's going to be. I think Joanne wanted to say something. Claudia.
Yes, unless Luis wanted to answer Henny's second part of the question first.
Not sure about the second part of Henny. Maybe Henny, you refresh.
Yes, that was about what you were saying to emphasize. It's not. Let's not only focus on the wallet. It's
Sorry.
the total chain of it's a semantic, it's technology, it's legal, it's governance, etc. To make this thing fly, you will have all things in place.
Yeah. So absolutely agree. Yeah, you are correct. So it's not about one element, let's say, right? It's not about the wallet itself. Even it's not. Let's say EBSI CAN is not technically focused. As said by Alex, and you already know, Fanny, because you were also involved in the first Canadian and EU approach or project initiative 3 years ago, 4 years ago, something like that. There was a second also work in progress that started maybe, I think it was last year, that was much focused on the technical interoperability. But here, as you can see, or as I said before, we are more focused on the business side, let's say. So it's about the governance. Of course, there are technical elements and technicalities that also we should be able at least to analyze and say, okay, this is how things could fit or whatever, right? But this is not a technical project, let's say, or not just a technical project, let's say, if I'm allowed to say. Okay.
Now we can jump to Joanne.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was reflecting on, Louis, as I was thinking this whole concept through, because we've had some experience going down this journey path before with interoperability, and just a couple of thoughts which other people can react to. I'm always very happy to see things like W3C, etc., because an opportunity then lends itself to, even from a desktop point of view, see how does EBSI line up to some of these broader standards. We can say quite comfortably that the work we're doing with our colleagues, our service partners on the micred side, that we're lining up comfortably with those kinds of broader standards. The other thing I would offer is that, and we know this, but it's important to call out, from a policy point of view, Canada's context is very different than the European context and the many countries that exist in the European context as well. We have 13 different provinces and territories, and they have different regulatory contexts, even at the school level. Some schools have their own legislative acts to operate. Some are part of a broader provincial legislative context. And this has a way of flavoring, shall we say, even the question earlier about identity management. And so I think paying attention to broader trust frameworks, such as the PCTF, but not just staying with the Pan-Canadian Trust Framework, recognizing that we have a certain standard we're using for the most part across the institutions in our country, which is not EBSI. It's actually not the whole EBSI framework, but I'll have an entirely different context. Again, that takes me back to my first point, the high value in leveraging things like the W3C and the standards out there. If, for example, our European partners can say comfortably that they can align with those, that then lends itself to interoperability and technical experimentation that you're alluding to, Louis. I also think that the constraints of the project are such that really we want to make sure we're supporting our European partners with proving out the possibilities. So again, leaning on the standards. just some food for thought. I don't know if people disagree or not. But my last point is identity is a very complex area. And to dive into that for the full scope of the project, I think would be a lot to take on, and perhaps not something you'd want to do beyond a policy look, shall we say.
Luis, I don't know if you want to clarify anything on that. I mean, I'm repeating the time frame, which is pretty aggressive. Okay, so we'll do what we can do with the time that we have. It may well be that this project will lead to other projects, and I think it's something you should keep in mind. Certainly from the EU perspective, they're serious about this, because of the significant investment made in EBSI, and I think we're at a critical standpoint right now. You know, even in terms of the future of EBSI, it is being used. There are large-scale pilots using it. I think so. That's what you need to keep in mind. I think. I think it's going to be impossible within the time frame we have, I think, to identify where all the gaps may be. I'd like us to focus on those user journeys that we started with. You know, is there anything that we're missing? And again, bearing in mind that no, Europe is not Canada, but I keep on saying there's no such a thing as a cohesive Europe when it comes to a homogeneous Europe when it comes to education. Okay, so at the best, this will be about maybe identifying pilots, which could also work, sandboxes, which could also work in Canada, key players that might want to be involved in a potential new attempt at using this technology in Canada. What might well be that, you know, on the basis of the expertise that we get, that we just simply say this is a dead duck. It's not going to work. We're hoping that that's not what we will conclude, but we're literally sitting on the fence on this one, despite the fact that some of us have been looking at and working with these technologies for many, many years. Who's next?
And just to complement Alex, I think we are aligned, and I know that identity is one of the hard points. But as I said before, the approach, it's a practical approach. So we will start based also on the current partners that are part of the project. So that, of course, will not cover all Canadian reality, neither European one, right? But I think the goal is to provide generic proposals and a methodological approach that then can be extended on the Canadian side and on the European side. But I think that's the practical approach and what can be really achieved in the timeline.
Sergio, next.
Yes. Just a clarification, but the goal is to think if EBSI could be extended also in Canada, because if we are trying to make two systems interoperable, is not only a system in Canada and another EBSI in Europe. It is not just the format in which the credential is written that must be interoperable, but also the trust model, because when the verifier in Europe try to verify this kind of credential, perhaps the credential itself is readable, but the trust model of EBSI was initially intended to contain all the TAO, the trust accreditation officer, the trusted issuer, the schemas. So, okay, the schemas could be the same, but about the hierarchy of accrediting bodies and issuers, the list could be different, because the Canadian system knows the trust model of Canada, and the European system knows the trust model for Europe. And an Italian wallet, an EBSI wallet could not know anything about the trust model in Canada. So we need to make some kind of interoperability also in the trust model in order to let the European wallet to interpret also the trust model of Canada and of the one of the other countries, of course. So we need a sort of or a kind of delegation. So I can ask this issue I can delegate, for example, the Canadian system to tell me if this issuer is entitled to issue such kind of credential or not. Because we need some kind of trust delegation between these two systems, I think, because they can be organized in different ways in different system in different country. So we need this kind of I think this kind of way of delegation, and also about. Because one problem of my colleagues is to understand if a foreign qualification is trusted or not, and the other problem is to understand if this qualification is the right one to match the requirement for to be enrolled in a specific course of study. So we need also to enrich the credential with a common way to express, for example, diploma supplement and other information that are required to meet the requirements, for example, for the Lisbon Convention to allow to make easy for our system to our officer to understand if the qualification is the right one for to meet the requirements.
Okay, thanks, Sergio.
Maybe should I stop sharing this, because I know there are people who are putting comments in the chat box, and a lot of them are interesting. Claudia, who else has his or her hand raised?
Johnny is next.
Okay.
Hello, yes, thank you. I think first of all, I think it's quite an interesting project, a lot of application potential. So I'm very interested to see how the conversation progresses for the next steps. I think it's my comment is a bit along the lines of the comment that Joanne Duclas shared, and also to the recognition in this group that both the concept or the governance of Europe and the governance of Canada is a set of collaborative governments. And yes, for all of us, we have different governance on the education as well as some other types of areas within our ecosystems. That said, I'm keen to see how we move forward and explore the where the Pan-Canadian Trust Framework PCTF is referenced. There are definitely some nuances between I would say that the EI-DAS Trust Framework and the Pan-Canadian Trust Framework are not exactly the same one-to-one comparison in terms of what they are, and in terms of their, one being EI-DAS ecosystem being out of regulation, regulatory approach, with the Pan-Canadian Trust Framework being more of a collaborative and authoritative to those who are adopting approach. And so and also we're very focused on trust criteria for risk management verification layered on top of technology. So this is basically what I wanted to say is where PCTF and EI-DAS Trust Framework show up, there will be some differences there. And I do think it's worth exploring what the alignments are and what the differences are for how those two tools are applied across these scenarios. So yeah, I appreciate all the information sharing. Thank you.
Thank you, Johnny. I think Nikos was next. Sorry, if Luis, you wanted to answer Johnny, then please do.
Well, I was going to write it here. Also, I replied to Sergio here. So I think one of the key points of the analysis should be one of the outputs should be just that as I think it was 1.5 or 2 months ago, or 1.5 months ago, also a comparison between the United States, let's say, identity framework and the AI that one was provided. That should also be one of the recommendations, I think, but we are going too far right now. But that should be right for legal entities, for natural person citizens, right, and so on, and to identify, because at the end, and also replying to Sergio, this is not about extending EBSI to Canada. It's not about that. So there are, how I see it, maybe we'll find that with 2 different trust models, one Canadian trust model and one European trust model, that then can be supported, or both can be supported by several trust frameworks. The EBSI CAN project will focus on the trust framework supported by EBSI. This will be on the European side. We need to find out on the Canadian side how things are put today, how to match, but we need to identify all those key elements. And at the end, what interoperability is about really is about profile matching. But a profile is characterized by the governance, the trust anchors, all this stuff for identity, for entitlement to act in a specific domain, jurisdiction, and so on, and all this stuff. But we need to be realistic also with with the timelines that we have, also with what is there, and of course, thanks to all our partners, we will start from reality and also linking with Joanne, so with specific simple use cases, because here the key point is not to provide a solution, is to find out what needs to be provided, right? Develop it, evolve on both sides to achieve potential interoperability between EU and Canada to facilitate mobility.
Nikos?
Yeah. What I think that what is worth mentioning here is that our approach on the cross-universities, cross-border, or even transatlantic recognition of educational achievement should be based on 2 main pillars. The first one is obvious, the development of the technical specification and the solution that would allow to our citizens, graduates, our university students, a frictionless privacy-preserving exchange of their credentials. This is very well understood topic that the EBSI team is already working to come up with the best possible solution. However, what it seems to be overlooked here is the semantic interoperability and the crucial role of the data models that should be used to convey these credentials. So if we could ask the university associations, such as the Greek University Network or the Association of Registrars of University and College in Canada, they would emphasize that it's not only crucial to provide the secure and privacy-enabled envelope for transferring credentials, but it's also paramount to thoroughly understand the contents of this envelope and be able to accurately map this information into their own student information system. This is crucial for universities. So we must not overlook in this project the importance of data models. The data models that should be used in these cross-university interoperability scenarios. And these data models should be also rich, flexible enough to encapsulate all these specificities, the vocabularies, the catalogs, whatever we already know within the higher education. Considering actually the inherent complexities and the constant changes in the curricula and the higher education changes that we all know that happens along the time, the obvious solution to address this kind of challenges is to leverage credentials and data models that will incorporate somehow contextual information. And based on a model based on the linked open data, let's not forget that universities' credentials won't be as simple and as straightforward as driver licenses. It would be a completely new story with a lot of complexities, with a lot of data in that. So let's not only focus on the transfer level, but let's also focus on the payload.
Fully agree, Nikos. As I said before, this is not about it's not a technological approach. It's not at all. So that means that, of course, the technical layer needs to be there, but the other ones, I think, are the most important for us.
That let me add that as far as GUnit is concerned, when we did the same exercise within the country, the most challenging problem that we need to come up with a solution wasn't the technical aspect of the platform. It was the validity of the data. It was the semantics of the data. And we won't be able to deliver anything to our citizens and to our customers and to our students if we won't come up also with a solution, if we don't complement the technical aspect of the solution along with the data semantics, semantics that would be understood by both Canada and Europe.
Can I jump in for a second? I'm aware of time. I know Luis has to go and pick up his son from somewhere. We've lost Ramesh because he's in another meeting. I mean, believe it or not, we've gone through an hour. My suggestion would be that if people want to, I mean, we're going to send you the material, and if some of you want to keep on this, you know, I think your feedback is going to be absolutely essential as to how this project is going to go. I started at the very beginning talking about pilots and sandboxes, and I'm going to finish again with that because the practicalities are, and some of us have been involved in some of these things. I mean, I project managed a blockchain project for my tiny country a while ago. And when you talk to people about that, it's a pilot, there's less resistance to this kind of thing. And all of you are right. When you talk about interoperability, it's human beings that can make or break a project. There is goodwill on both sides, and we find those bridges, and it has to be win-win. This can't be just win-win for the Europeans or the Canadians. We have to find some scenarios where and I keep on saying, if we can deploy this technology and bridge it, you know, with other initiatives happening in Canada, then let's identify them. If it looks like it was a waste of time, I'm very happy to you know, as the guy switch out the project, we'll conclude and tell the European Commission, look elsewhere. So my feeling is that's what we should be focusing on here. There's a lot of stuff in the chat here, so I don't know. I mean, but we've lost some people here, so I don't know whether it's worth our while going through these, or whether Claudia, you're going to be. I mean, we'll have these here, or if somebody else wants to jump in now, we want to spend another 5 minutes, not more. I know Luis needs to run. You guys tell me. Joshua, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, so I mean, Alex, you said there's only a few months left on it, so I think it's important to scope what is going to be done within the few months. And my experience in every single blockchain project I've seen done both locally and also internationally is that whilst great solutions were proposed, most of them failed because the stakeholders weren't on board. So my advice would be get the stakeholders who are on board and then build the use case around those stakeholders, because resistance is always the downfall of these types of projects.
Yep, totally agree. And I think that's almost like our point of departure, even though, you know, it looks like, again, you know, Europe meets Canada, is not going to be nothing like that. Let's identify those pockets where something can happen. People like Joanne and Simone and other people were involved in various discussions between DG Connect and, I guess, other, you know, entities in Canada for a while. I think even from the EBSI perspective, we had some feedback. Some saying, "Oh, we're going back to this. How come?" And then when we explained that there is maybe another window which is opening, I think from our point of view, I think the IDAS and all of these other identity windows opening up in Europe is going to make this thing very current again. The fact that the future of EBSI is being rethought, reconfigured, is also very interesting. So I think we're at this interesting moment right now. But I repeat, I think our objective is, can we identify some of those use cases You know, are the use cases valid or not? I've seen simplification. I've seen what Heinz was saying about how the private sector would look at this. And by the way, when Heinz's dissertation is available, some of you should read it because he's gone into a huge depth in terms of how EBSI can work and not work from a private sector perspective, I think. So that will also be valuable input to all of this thing. I think how can we move forward, I think is my question. So could you please let Claudia know if you'd like to keep on being involved in discussions, if you have other ideas, you know, and we can easily have another session like this at some stage. Clearly, we would like to speak to some people within government, federal government, at some stage in Canada. If some of you can help facilitate those discussions, this would be helpful because again, we know some of the key players in this part of the world, so we really need to rely on you on this one. That's what I have to say. I don't know, Claudia, if there's anything else that I've missed out on. I mean, other than that, you know, the messages are, you know, we've got loads to think about here. We're not going to lose any of these comments. I think it's more a case of, I think it's going to be, I think first thing is, can you tell Claudia if you'd like to remain involved in this? Do we need another one of these sessions at some stage? Do you have other colleagues that you think can add some value in this discussion? I think, and then we'll take it from there.
Yes, we will share the slides. So in the coming days, you will receive them via email. And please just let me know if you would like to be more involved so we can organize another session for another hour if you will be free to do that. Also, you can give us any comment via email.
And again, just to make the point, we're really grateful. We know that you know, it was like impossible. Like, can you meet us next week? So we're really grateful for the fact that you guys showed up. You know, really,
sorry about that. Yes.
Really grateful for that, and we'll give you some better time frames within that. But I think for the time being, once you've looked at the slides, see if there's anything we've missed out or something that obvious that we're ignoring, I think. But again, I'll leave you with this, okay? These things work or don't work because of human beings, not because of technology. If there is some buy-in somewhere, these things work and people will make it work. But for this to work, so people have to see something in it for them, whether they're a registrar, whether they're working at the university, whether it's a technology firm, whether it's, you know, micreds, whether it's, you know, ARIC, whether it's Parchment for all I know. Okay, that's the way these things will work. So we have to identify, if this project can identify some of those bridges, we'd have achieved something which hasn't been achieved till now.